We studied the life of Nehemiah. We studied the book of Nehemiah in some detail. And he was the cupbearer to the king. Pretty important, because he's the guy who has to kind of taste the wine before the king drinks it. So if somebody's trying to poison the king, guess who goes first? Okay. So Nehemiah, needless to say, is essential to the king. He has got to have it's not a powerful, has no power to it. I mean, he's just the cupbearer. He comes up, he takes the cup, gets the wine, takes it over to the king, drinks it a little bit, hands it to the king, telling him it's okay. Not a powerful situation. He doesn't command armies. He doesn't have legions of people at his disposal. He's just really a very simple man with a very simple job, albeit responsible job. It's not maybe a powerful job, but it is a job with influence, because the king has to trust this guy. When the king is alone, he is still with him. He's like his personal bodyguard and food taster and all that kind of stuff. So he never really is outside the king's presence. So this gives him a lot of influence. Well, he gets this story back about what's going on in Jerusalem, how these people are free to just come in and take anything they want, anytime they want. And he begins to feel bad. Now, here's the thing. You can't feel bad in the presence of the king. Because remember, the king, he saw himself as God. And you were supposed to be just absolutely thrilled with just being in his presence. The greatest thing that ever happened to me was I stood before the king. And the king notices that he's holding back some tears. So he calls him on it. You don't look glad today. If you ain't glad. Had to be a moment of fear. But he is a trusted man, and the king does like him. So the king presses him a little bit. You're not supposed to tell the king anything depressing, anything bad. That's not what you're supposed to do. But Nehemiah can't help but feel for his people. And so he says to the king, hey, you're a wonderful guy. And I really am glad that I'm here. And this is a great job, and I really like it. But I wouldn't be honest to you. And I have to be honest with you because, after all, I have a job that requires honesty in your presence. It's hard for me to stand here and smile when I think about my people in Jerusalem and how they're suffering. It's hard for me not to feel for them. What's going on back home? And he tells him the story about what's going on back home. And the king says, you know what? We ought to do something about that. In fact, you ought to do something about that. That really wasn't my plan here. I was hoping you would do something about it when I told you. So the king commissions him. Again, like he did with Zerubbabel and like they did with Ezra, he equips his expedition. Anybody who wants to go may return home. You're free to come, you're free to stay, and you're free to leave. He tells them to get them to go. He tells them about the promises that the king made and what is waiting for them. And he does get some folks to go back with him. And this is our third wave of people going back. And we saw just a moment ago the roadmap. And so again, here is he follows the same route that Ezra followed 13 years ago. It worked for him, worked for me 13 years later. So he leaves the palace and he heads on out following this red line, comes on in, reaches into Jerusalem. And it's bad. People have rebuilt, remember, under Zerubbabel. They got home. He gave everybody a couple of months here. You need to build your house. And after they built their houses, now let's get busy on the temple. And it took them some time to finally kick it in gear, remember? They stopped for a long time with Zerubbabel. He got discouraged, they got discouraged. And so the work stopped for a while. I think it was 18 years if I recall. And then, it's like 18 years. That's a long time. I mean, that's longer than JD's been around. That's longer than Mr. Christian's been around. That's longer than this crippled child's been with us. All right? 18 years they stopped. Finally, Zerubbabel's heart is touched again. He preaches a powerful sermon, and the people get out there and they rebuild the temple. Ezra gets news that the temple is doing so well. He comes back now to reinstitute the priesthood and to get it moving forward. He comes to town and finds out, yeah, there's a lot of priests, but they're not qualified. See, here's the problem. You don't only supposed to do what God wants you to do, but you have to do it His way. A lot of churches are out there, and they're calling themselves churches, and they're doing all kinds of great stuff, but they're not doing anything God's way. And God says, well, I'm glad you're doing that, but I would prefer you do it my way. And so Ezra comes in and he reminds people, for example, all these priests out here, they're married to foreign women. They're not married to Jewish wives. They have to quit. Because the Bible says that the priest has to be married to a Jewish woman in order to go into the temple. So he kicks all the priests out, except for the few men who are married to Jewish wives. And they have to rebuild from this smaller number. Everybody would love to have the big crowd, the big choir, the big this, the big... But God wasn't interested in big. He was interested in pure. And so Ezra rebuilds this to pure. We remember that from last week. Now as we move, Nehemiah comes in. His job now is to build the wall. How many days did it take him? Remember? How many days did it take him to rebuild the wall? We made a big to-do about this last year. We did something a couple of years ago. In fact, we did something in a similar fashion when we redid these pews. Anybody remember what it was? 52 days. There are 52 days in the life of Christ in the New Testament. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John cover 52 days of Jesus' life. He rebuilt the temple, and we repaved or redid these pews in 52 days. That was our hope and our anxious thing. So from start to finish, 52. So that was an important number. Also happens to be the number of weeks in a year that you and I judge ourselves by. But he told them, he comes back to Jerusalem, he says to the people, we need to rebuild this wall. We need to make sure that we're safe and that you're safe and that our temple is safe. We can't have folks just marching in and out and taking anything that they want anytime they want it. Let me tell you what the king said to me. And he reminds him of the promise that the king gave him about protection, about helping them, about their right, and how that the king was inspired by their God. So he shares that with the people to rebuild. That gets them going. They rebuild the wall. They're going to rebuild this wall in 52 days. A remarkable feat around the city of Jerusalem. Now let's take a look at him. First of all, let's consider the good in his life, Nehemiah. This is just a character study, and so we want to take a look. The good, the bad, and the lesson. The good, the bad, and the lesson. So first of all, the good. The good thing about Nehemiah was he was a man of prayer. When you read the book of Nehemiah, and it's only a couple of chapters, and you should all do it. When you read the book of Nehemiah, you will notice he's constantly praying. He talks to God throughout the book. From the very first chapter to the very last sentence in the book. God, keep thinking on me for good. God, keep leading me to do good. God, keep directing, keep showing. I want to do what you want me to do, but you've got to show me what I'm supposed to be doing. And so his life is a constant and persistent prayer. Even while he was back in the palace, had a good cushy job, a good comfortable life, he was concerned about his people. He was concerned about Jerusalem. And because he was concerned, when God wanted to send somebody to rebuild it, why not send somebody who cares? And since this man cared enough to pray, God said to him, I'm sending you back. So all of a sudden, remember, he was just a cupbearer. He wasn't a leader. He was just a cupbearer. And God took that humble cupbearer who simply gave the cup to the king, and now God made him the governor over Israel. Pretty prestigious job. From going to be a cupbearer to being a ruler and a leader. And people are following this guy because he cared. He cared about them. He cared about their situation. He cared enough to leave, to travel that 900 miles from what you and I would call Iran today. He would leave Tehran, because he cares for the Jews, travel all the way through Saudi Arabia to get himself into Israel. Today, that would be a phenomenal trip. If there was even a Jew in Tehran, we would be surprised, right? But then for him to leave a good job, comfortable job, successful man, secure in what he was doing. His pal was the king. Maybe he wasn't powerful, but he was very influential. And he leaves that influential, comfortable job to come out here and to build a wall. And he does it because he knows this much: you have to pray. And he prayed for his people, he prayed for his city, he prayed to his God to do only those things that God could do in this situation. I'm not there. And even if I was in Jerusalem, how could I save these people? How could I protect them? I'm one man. God, I need you to watch over and protect your people. Second thing we noticed about him is that he led that third group of exiles back to Jerusalem. Zerubbabel, Ezra, and now Nehemiah. This completes the 70 years that God said, for 70 years you will be in exile. He took them in 3 stages into exile. First group, second group, third group. Then he brought them out. First group in, first group out. Second group that went in, second group to come out. Third group that went in is the third group to come out. So 70, 70, 70 years. God has worked it. And 70 years from the first group to his group, 70 years later, his people are now coming out and going back to Jerusalem. God is very, very conscious of his word, and he also knows how to do math. And so you learn that when you study this, how God did all this. So the priesthood is there, the temple is there, protection is missing. And they need that symbol of protection. They need that so that the enemies around about know that they're back and they're staying. If you don't have a wall around your city, it means you might be leaving tomorrow. But how do you demonstrate that we plan to stay here forever? The more secure the wall, the longer you're planning on staying. And so when they rebuild this wall, it says to the rest of the world, we're here. Yes, we were taken, but we weren't taken by a foreign army. We were taken by our God out of this land. Yes, he used a foreign army to do it, but God is in control of all things all the time. And so our God now is bringing us back, and we're going to stay this time. So this demonstration is demonstrated by the wall. It says to people, God is bringing us back, and he's bringing us back to stay. It's our home. These are the ideas that he shares with the people, and he gets them to build the wall around Jerusalem, and he gets them to build it in 52 days. What a magnificent mind must have been his to be able to lay down the plans. Remember, his idea was, listen, okay, here's your house. So you build the wall in front of your house. What an inspiration. If enemies come, I don't want them getting my family. So guess what part of the wall I'm going to build best? Yours? I don't think so. But I'll tell you, I'm going to do my absolute best work when I build the wall in front of my house. It's not going to fall down. So each man now is responsible to build a section in front of his house. His family, each family that lived here, will build the wall here. 52, you can see now how 52 days isn't that much time for me to build a section of wall. I'm going to be so everybody's building, they're all working together to build this wall that surrounds Jerusalem. And they're all building it just right out in front of their own front yard. And they're building it strong and secure because that's the wall that's going to save me. I want this big, thick part in front of my house. I want this area up here where I can peek over and where I can prevent. If the enemy comes, I want to be able to get up on that wall. I want to be able to see him coming. And I want to defend my part. I want to defend my house. And I want my part to be built the best that I can. That was an inspiration. I wonder where he got that idea. Probably from all that prayer he did with God. And God said, you know what? People are motivated really to take care of themselves and anything else. Most important thing we know is us and our family. And so to get them to work so hard, so fast, and accomplish a miracle, the rebuilding of this wall around Jerusalem, he comes up with this idea. Got it from God. Got it from God. And it works well. So they build the house around Jerusalem in 52 days. Now the wall is built. Jerusalem is safe. They got the gates up. People can't just come through now. They got to wait at the gate and say, hey, can we enter? They got a gatekeeper to open the gate. They can control now who comes in and out. They can control this gate. They can keep these ones closed up, or they can open them all up to let people in and out as they need to go. But at night now, the folks inside are safe. There's now a safe place for the farmers and all to go when they're in fear of some sort of an enemy. They've got a place that they could go inside of and be secure. So now they have a place to build from and to work from and to reclaim and regain their properties from. 52 days. But he begins to notice, the people, they don't know the Lord like I do. They have, many of them, drifted away from their relationship with the Lord. And so now that they are safe behind the wall, he wants them to be safe in the Lord. So he begins a great revival. He begins to share with them what's on his heart. This is what God said to me. And this is what God got the king to say to me. Can you imagine if you could get the king to say to you what he said to me? Now, I got the king to say it because I went to the Lord. I didn't go to the king and get him to promise me anything. Who am I that I could do that? I'm just a cupbearer. Why would the king listen to me? But the king would listen to God, so I talked to God at night, and God talked to the king during the day. And here I am with all these resources, and here we are now with this built. Wouldn't you like to have that kind of relationship with God where you could say to God, you know what? I need something from that man over there. Can you get it from him for me? Stop and think about what that would do. We're talking about your daughter having a job. Imagine if you could get God. You don't even know where her job is. But I wonder, and I'm supposing that God does. He's pretty smart, right? He knows a lot of stuff. So how about, like we did tonight, we talk to the Lord. Because he knows all this stuff out here. And if we could get God to move, if he hears us, then we have the petition that we made. I have no influence over men, but my hope is that I have some influence with God. And so I can go to the Lord and say, Lord, here's what I have need of. Then he could look around and find a way for me to get it. And he gets from the king much more than he ever dreamed possible, because he didn't ask. His thought maybe was, you know what? I'd like a ticket home. So you go to the king and you say, you know what? I'd like to get back to Jerusalem to see what's going on. All right. Here's $10. That'll get you on the next caravan. See you when you get back, if you come back. But when he goes to the Lord says, you know what? You need so much more than that. I mean, I need you to build a wall. I haven't told you that yet. God doesn't tell him about the wall until he gets there. He didn't know he needed money. He didn't know that he needed troops to protect him on his journey. He didn't know a lot of stuff that God did know. So when God got the king to act on his behalf, suddenly he got more than he knew to even ask. And that's the thing about prayer. You have to remember Romans. You don't know how to pray as you ought. Because when we look at a problem, we look at the thing that bothers us about a problem. This thing that troubles my heart. But I don't see all the ramifications around it. But God does. And God knows how to make those things happen. And knows how to make those things work out. Example from my own life, when I'm praying for my dad. All I knew as a young man is that I wanted my father back. I had if I could have, I suppose, somehow found him and brought him over to my house, I don't think things would have worked out the way they did. Because I didn't know that, well, I did know. My mom hated him, wanted him dead. Charlie wanted him dead. My younger brothers didn't even know him, and so they didn't even know anything about him. So there was a lot of indifference and a lot of hatred about finding the old man. And God knew all that. So when I'm praying, God is having to do so much more than I'm asking for, because I didn't realize how big a problem this really was. And God has to deal with this big problem, and I'm just looking at this one little area. I want this. And God says, well, in order to get that, you got to have all this too. So God had to do all this too just to give me that one little thing that I thought I needed. He worked it out so well that Charlie says, instead of killing his dad, says, Dad, will you be at my wedding? And my mom says to this man that she wanted dead for so long, why don't you come and spend a couple of weeks with us? And I said, Dad, I don't think you're going to go. She's going to bury you in her backyard. But see, God had taken care of all of that. He restored all that stuff that I wasn't even aware about. His brothers and sisters, not just me, but there was this, I'm from a good-sized family. And there were a lot of people that God had to take care of and get involved in all of this, so that all of his brothers and sisters would have an opportunity to see and to meet him. It's a huge, huge undertaking. One that if I had to think about it, would have been too big for me. But I made this one little prayer, but I made it to God who saw all of those things. Nehemiah, he saw that he wanted to get home and help his people, but he didn't realize how big a job it really was. So when he comes, God shows up with him. And so a man who could not build a wall, he's just a cupbearer, gets a wall built in 52 days because God's there. And God just so happened to make sure that the right people were there with him, so that the engineers and the architects and all the rest of those people who could guide him and lead him and show him were also inspired by the same idea he was inspired by, because God was there. So he leads them not only to a reform but a great revival, because he could say, look at what God is doing in my life. And people say, I wish God was doing something in my life too. If you want God to do something in your life, I'll show you what he said. First of all, let's go to the bad about him. None recorded. Surprise, surprise. This is a good guy. I suppose if you wanted to get the dirt on him, you could call TMZ or Channel 4, and somebody might be able to dig up some dirt, but God didn't bother recording anything about him negative. So we're not told anything bad about him. Few characters in the Bible that nothing bad is said about him, and he's one of them. Ezra, nothing bad. Good stuff, good story. Nehemiah, nothing bad. So let's look then at what we call the lessons from his life, and this is really where it all comes down for us. The very first lesson is this: the first step in any undertaking is to pray. Before you do anything, pray about it. Because it might not be something, God might not want you to do what you're thinking about doing. On the other hand, God might have a much larger plan than you realize about what you want to do. God might say, that's a good idea, but let's carry it larger. And since you're interested, I'm going to use you to do it. If you don't want to get used by God, don't have any interests. Don't care about anything, and you'll be fine. So the very first step in any undertaking is to pray. Second, we learn from his life the truth of this verse, and maybe Paul got it from him. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Can you build a wall around Jerusalem in 52 days? Everybody thought he was nuts. They didn't have a time frame. They were just worried about being able to build a wall, period. Remember, when he's building this wall, there's enemies around them. So when the men were constructing, he told them, have your hammer in this hand and your sword in the other hand. So they had the trowel and the sword. They were always ready. They were ready to build and they were ready to fight at the same time. While I'm building, instead of a hard hat, have your helmet on. You've got to, so he prepares his people for two things. They're battling and building at the same time. And with this battling and building, they're still able to get it done in 52 days. The enemies didn't want it because they knew once that wall gets built, they can't come and go like they used to. They can't come over here and ransack the temple. They can't come over here and pick off this family and steal from that house and rob these people over here. They can't go to the marketplaces and run amok on it. There's going to be law and order. Oh, what are we going to do? What are we going to do when law and order comes to town? So they didn't want that built. But God gave them an idea. The sword and the trowel. You build and battle at the same time. Sometimes building is nothing but a battle. It'll feel that way. But whenever you're doing something for God, whenever you're building, you're always going to have an enemy. You can't do anything for God that doesn't upset the devil. Just can't. So you have to know that. You have to have your trowel in this hand, and you have to have your sword in this hand, or vice versa, depending on which hand you're better with. I'd keep my sword over here because this is the hand, and then maybe my trowel is a little sloppy, but hey, I'll take you out if you get too close. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens. He didn't know that he could even do that. And that's the secret of Christianity. There are things you will accomplish that you had no idea you'll do. When your life is over, you'll say to yourself, I didn't know I could do that. I didn't realize I could get that done or that done or that done. But there's an awful lot that we get done. Because I can do all things. There's nothing to stop me if God wants it done. God wanted a wall. Did God get a wall? Sure. Who did he use to build the wall? Not a wall builder. Why didn't God go get a carpenter or a bricklayer? He gets a cupbearer to build a wall. What does the guy know about walls? Nothing. But he knows about caring about people. And thirdly, life. And this is the secret to Nehemiah's life, and if it becomes our secret, we'll be successful too. Life requires talking with God and walking with God. You have to learn to talk and to walk. You have to learn to walk with God like Adam did in the cool of the day. In the cool of the evening, God would come into the garden and him and Adam would walk off for a while and talk. There has to be the process of we pray when it's damage control. God, can you save me from, like Peter, Lord, help me. Why? Because his head was going under the water. But life has to be more than calling on God when we're in an emergency. There has to be, my kids might come from time to time and say, Dad, I need some help. And I don't mind helping. Because there's also times when they just come over to be with Dad. They come on over just so we could sit there and maybe watch a game. Pick on the grandkids. Some goodly cause. JD comes by. He doesn't always say, Grandpa, feed me. Sometimes he says, hey, Grandpa, I'm going to clean your clock in this here game. All right, I felt sorry for him, so I let him beat me 13 times straight. You really believe I let him? Okay, but see, so when he comes over and we're having a relationship, we're sitting there laughing, having a good time, talking to each other while he's destroying me over and over and over again. But again, I was just being kind, and I told him that. I said, I'm just being gentle with you. He didn't believe me. He wiped my man out again. But one of these days, I'm going to get JD. And he ain't even going to see it coming. He's just going to be toast. I told him that. I said, you're going to know what toast feels like, boy, when I get you. He isn't too much worried. He knows he's toasted Grandpa so far. So far, I say to him. But that talking, that enjoyment we have together, so then when he's in a need and he says, Grandpa, I need this. Well, because I know he loves me. I know JD cares about me. So if JD needs something, then I need it too. Right? When I need something, does God need it too? If I was a close companion, if I had walked and talked with God, so where God could feel what I feel. Remember, if you can get two people to agree on anything, you can have it. If I could get God to feel like I feel, how do I get it? By calling every now and then only when I'm in trouble? Or by learning to walk and talk day by day? To spend time. In the morning I get in my car and for 45 minutes I have God captive. In prayer and in Psalms. On the way home, I've got God captive. He can't get away for 45 minutes. So that's an hour and a half that God can't get away. The rest of the time I have to chase him around because he's pretty busy. But an hour and a half a day, he can't move. He can't move. I've got him captive in my car. And maybe we don't walk and talk, but we're talking and driving. And then I try to walk that life that he is trying to get me to live throughout the course of my day. Life requires talking with God and walking with him. It's not all about God give me. Sometimes it's just wanting to be with him and telling him how much you enjoyed it. Looking forward to seeing him when he comes here Sunday morning. Looking forward to seeing him when he gets here on Wednesday night. See, those are the things. We talked all day and he said, hey, I'll see you tonight at church. I'm going to be there. And as soon as the second person shows up, he's there too. So he kept his word to me. This afternoon when he said to me, I'll see you at church, there he is. Sunday morning, Saturday night when he says, I'll see you in church tomorrow, I'm all excited about it. No wonder David could say, you know what? I'm excited about being in your house. When you stop and think about it like that, when you walk and talk or talk and walk, that's the secret of it. That was Nehemiah's life. He could talk to God like nobody's business because he walked with God like it was his only business. And he knew that God felt about things the same way he did. And God knew, hey, you know what? Nehemiah cares about those people as much as I do. I bet if I asked Nehemiah, he'd go there and help me build that wall. When we care about the things God cares about, then God can get things done. If all we care about is ourselves and how it affects us, God can get greedy people at any time. He needs people who care. And that's talking and walking. Talking and walking. Let's pray.